What's up, U.S. History? Welcome back to class. All right, today we got a reading comprehension quiz. Just what you wanted to hear, right? We haven't done one of these in a little while. We had done a couple in the first semester, I think, where we were reading some text excerpts and a chapter out of a book from World War I. Anyway, I thought this was an ideal time now that we kind of laid the groundwork for World War II. We've covered up through the Pearl Harbor attack and how America, gets hit in this sneak attack by the Japanese, and then that really cripples our Pacific Fleet. In Japan, for a several-month period, for about 6 months after that, they just go on a rampage in the Pacific and start to set up and establish their self-sufficient empire, right? So in that 6-month period before America is ready to start going on the offensive and fighting back, we lose a lot of territory. Remember, you go way back to the beginning of the course, we had talked about the Spanish-American War and the annexation of Hawaii. So America had picked up Hawaii. That's kind of in safe turf. Hawaii is more on our side of the Pacific, but the Philippines and Guam, the Marshall Islands, a few other places, and some British territories are way over on the far side of the Pacific, over closer to Japan. Well, all of those territories are overrun by the Japanese army. Typically, though, that little part of history is not as well known as the Pearl Harbor attack. Pearl Harbor kind of overshadows that. But man, some really horrific things happen, and Japan is kicking butt at this point in the war, and they're just gobbling up island after island. Well, the islands that are owned by America, or that were part of like commonwealths that are our territory, all have American military bases on them. And tens of thousands of American young servicemen get captured and taken as POWs. Now, in the Japanese army, remember, they're an honor culture. And if a Japanese outpost is about to be overrun, usually they will give the order out that you are going to fight to the death. And for the most part, those Japanese soldiers actually do that. But for our Western culture, our European culture, typically, in America, or even if you're talking about the Germans or the Russians or the British, if a battle becomes absolutely hopeless and there is no chance that you're going to win it, usually we would think you're going to surrender. You'll be a prisoner of war, right? Which is what most of the American and the Filipino soldiers that were stationed for the account that you're going to be reading today in the Philippine Islands. Those Filipino guys, of course, they're fighting with America. They're on our side. Those guys surrendered to the Japanese. And Japan has that honor culture. Remember, the worst thing you could be in their culture, in their eyes, is dishonorable. And they look at all of those POWs, whether they're a white American guy or a brown-skinned Asian Filipino soldier, they look at them all as dishonorable. And if you're dishonorable, well, they can treat you like dirt. They can just be ruthless and mean and do a lot of horrific things to you. Well, this is a little piece of history that we know very well today, and we have a lot of firsthand accounts. But in those early months of the war, the guys that were behind Japanese lines that are taken as POWs, they're just off the radar, and nobody knows what's going on with them. So we hope that the Japanese are treating them honorably and just treating them like normal prisoners of war, and they're going to be held until the peace treaty is negotiated or the war is over. But that's really not the case. They just treat these guys horrifically. They starve them to death. They are mean to them. They torture them. In many cases, they execute a lot of them, or they just work them to death and try to kill them that way. Most of our guys had no access to medicine, so they get dysentery and malaria, all these horrible tropical diseases. So for the account that you're reading today, you're going to hear a firsthand source, or a primary source, or a firsthand account of a guy that was captured in the Philippines in the wake of Pearl Harbor. And he spends weeks, or up to, I think, a month or two as a Japanese POW. Now, most of the guys that were taken as POWs are not as lucky as the guy you see right here. His name is Captain William Diaz. I think, to the best of my research, about 4 guys at this early part in the war in like 1942 we got out of the Japanese prisoner camps. Captain Diaz actually had some friends on the Philippine Islands, some Filipino people that helped kind of like get him out of there and smuggle him off the islands and send him back to America. Most of the guys aren't able to get out, and they're stuck there, and many of them die in these POW camps. But Captain Diaz was one of the lucky ones that did get out of there pretty early, and when he comes back to America, he tells his whole story of all the horrific things that he witnessed and was kind of a part of it and was subjected to, and it's used as like propaganda, but it's also, on the other hand, usually a lot of times people think of propaganda as false or misleading. In this case, this stuff really was going down, and the U.S. government used his story to throw it out there to the American people to, basically convince America that, hey, these guys are evil. They are just rotten to the core, and it is a war of good versus evil, two different kind of ideologies, and that America needs to see this through. So most people are on board with, hey, the Japanese have it coming after they sneak attacked us at Pearl Harbor. But if you are still on the fence after reading Captain Diaz's account, man, it would make your blood boil, and it definitely got more people on board and more outraged at Japan, and fan the flames of war for America to go out there and kick some butt. So now his whole account is like 30 some pages. I cut out, it's about 2 pages front and back worth of text where I just took certain highlighted portions, and in each chunk, as you go through and read it, it kind of explains who he is, gives you a background for the Bataan Death March, which takes place in 1942, very soon after Pearl Harbor. And then it's broken down into some sections where you'll see like different things that the Japanese did to them while they were, in their custody and in their prison camps. So I hope you like this. Maybe saying like it is the wrong way of going about it, because it's really rotten, grisly stuff. But I hope you find it engaging and enlightening, and it exposes you to a little part of World War II that you may not have been aware of before this. So for the quiz, after watching my commentary, you're going to pull up the article that you see behind you right here, go through and read the excerpt that I provided for you, this account that comes from Captain Diaz, and then there is going to be 6 questions on a quiz that'll be on a separate post. All of the quiz questions can be answered by reading the text. So go through, read them, read it really close, answer the questions, and hopefully you get full credit and ace it. So that's what I got. If you have any questions, by all means, shoot me an email. Take care.